Hey everyone, Chris Carter here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. Today, I want to talk about how Omar Khan not only is solving the big problems the Steelers facing, but also the little depth problems that they have on the roster that turn into bigger problems because they're not addressed. The importance of that and answering your mailbag questions here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show in your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Turn any TV into your Xbox, no console needed. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to learn more. All right, Steelers fans, let's get to the point that I was talking about here, and it's about Omar Khan. Now, everyone knows the Steelers had serious draft problems from about 2018 to 2021 under Kevin Colbert, from the first round misses to the lack of depth pieces in the middle rounds. The only players out of the 31 players they picked in those years that are still on the roster right now are Mason Rudolph, Alex Highsmith, and Pat Freiermuth and Isaiah Loudermilk. And Isaiah Loudermilk might not be for long considering the investments they've made on the D-line this year. And we'll see what happens with the 2022 class. The reason I didn't include them was because, yes, Pickett's part of that class, and that makes it pretty rough. But they still have Pickens, they still have Leal, they still have Austin, they still have Hayward, Mark Robinson. If Pickens in Austin or if two of those players work out, then that actually turns into a not as bad class. Still first rounder not hitting does make it rough. But by and large, there were a bunch of misses in the Steelers drafts in those years that created problems, and the Steelers didn't have the support in several positions across the roster to help them solve a lot of different problems, which kept them from being, I think, an elite team. But what kept them being a good team was often their ability to have top high-end players who were able to carry the squad. That's why T.J. Watt, Cam Hayward, Minkah Fitzpatrick, at times Alex Highsmith, those guys made such elite plays so many times that would carry the team, but that would overmask the Steelers' problems at the depth issues that they had with several other spots in their roster, like different times, cornerback, the strong safety position at times, the linebacker position, the entire offense for some years. You get what I'm saying there. But the point was, year after year, the Steelers had missed, and so what Omar Khan has had to do in his first three drafts is address not only those key positions with those early draft picks, like we've seen with the tackle position with Broderick Jones and Troy Fautanu, and now Derek Harmon, but also those middle draft positions that they've been looking at. Take a look at the moves that he's done to try to solidify big time weaknesses. Remember when TJ Watt went down with 2022 when he got injured, missed half the season, and the Steelers had to go sign random people. They had no answers, and the edge rusher position was hurt. It was terrible until he returned, and then they were able to fight their way back that season. Well, after that, they were able to, what did he do? He made sure in the middle rounds to go get someone to help with that. And he got Nick Herbig in the fourth round. He also got an extra corner in Corey Trice in the seventh round. Both guys have been depth pieces that have worked out and helped at different spots and helped them, the Steelers, win key moments. In 2024, more middle round help that brought that we've seen immediate impact. Peyton Wilson and Mason McCormick both have been key pieces that have helped on both sides of the ball in their rookie seasons. Peyton Wilson, of course, some amazing plays at linebacker, and projects out to be, maybe he could be a real threat at the linebacker position long term next to Patrick Queen and other guys like that. But Mason McCormick as well on the offensive line, while Zach Frazier and Broderick Jones were, the key elements of the offensive line that they've invested into. Mason McCormick's presence there as a fourth round pick really helps out. And it's those key picks that often end up being the parts of the Steelers franchises, or any franchises really, that help carry them along. You go back to those 2000 Steelers teams and some of the players that they added there. And I talked about this with Ray Fittipaldo a little bit on the North Shore Drive podcast yesterday. Go check that out if you haven't checked that out yet. But you think back to like those 2000 Steelers that were really good. It was a lot of those middle round picks that really helped them. Hines Ward and Deshae Townsend were third and fourth round picks. Joey Porter, third round pick. Aaron Smith, key element of the defensive line, fourth round pick. You go back and you get like Larry Foote, 4th round pick, Chris Hope, 3rd round pick. A lot of those middle rounds were really important. Ike Taylor, 4th round pick. There were a lot of guys that were really important to hit on in those middle rounds, and that's what I think Omar Khan is trying to do by getting guys that can be helpful at those positions, but also addressing those positions of need. This time around in 2025, Omar Khan used a 4th round pick to get a complementing edge rusher to Herbig, because Herbig, smaller, quicker, really good pass rusher, not as good against the run. Has some limiting skill sets there. So what do you get? You get Jack Sawyer out of Ohio State, who's a bigger, stronger player who can rush the passer, isn't as proficient as Nick Herbig with his pass rush moves, but he can help against the run, which was one of the Steelers' biggest issues going, at the end of the season. He can help with that depth there on the edge, and then also helping with the depth on the interior, Yahya Black, who you hope to get some potential inside presence off the bench, where he can be more physical than they've had coming off the bench at the defensive line position. And that could be another bully on your defensive line that gives you that sort of depth where you're not just depending on Cam Hayward, Keanu Benton, now Derek Harmon as your top guys. You need guys behind them who can wreck shop. The Steelers have let go of Montravius Adams. As Carl Dunbar said, he's like, they're setting the table. These guys got to come. They got to come prove their worth if they want their dinner. And so I think that's what the Steelers D-line is going to be headed to. And again, it's addressing that depth. The Steelers have been lacking real strength at depth at several positions because they hadn't been able to pick well in those areas. Omar Khan and Andy Weidl, I think, are starting to rectify that and start to get those things moving forward, and that plays a big role there. And of course, as far as another depth pick this year, there's Will Howard, who could be a key depth addition too, based on however the QB room plays out. But the point is that the Steelers have been addressing these depth issues, and it's going to be, I think, they could be much bigger to the Steelers' future success than people realize. When people were saying, "Oh, why did they draft an edge rusher? Why didn't they draft a quarterback in that round?" If Jack Sawyer turns out to be, like, I was looking at mock drafts, a year that were coming out like a year before this past draft, like the way too early mock drafts, and there were some people that thought Jack Sawyer could have been a 1st or a 2nd round pick going into at that stage, but I don't think it was that popular, but I saw some of them that were, and I was like, okay, I can see that. So getting a guy like that in the 4th round, also a guy that I valued as a top 100 player, I think that's good value there. And if he works out, then you have you have 2 sets of edge rushers that you can trust to rotate in throughout the game. That could be a serious weapon to make sure that you're never hurting at that position, and there's less weaknesses on your roster. And let's face it, the Steelers have had a lot of weaknesses over the years in their roster that they've had to make up for. So I think bottom line, if the Steelers could be a more balanced unit when it comes to winning from different spots, it could go a long way to them not allowing as many mismatches as we've seen that allow the Steelers to have problems like not being able to stop the run late in games, getting abused by certain positions. I think that's the thing that the Steelers have been trying to fix. And again, I think it's key because you look at the way Omar Khan and Andy Weidl have done it so far. They haven't been just position needy in these drafts. They've been drafting for best player available. They've been trying to match guys' value to where they're getting picked in the draft, but they've also been able to match it up with, hey, what are the best parts of this draft? Like, for example, when Broderick Jones was selected, we still have to see if Broderick Jones pans out, but that was a tackle-heavy draft class where a lot of people were excited about the tackles in that draft class. You look at this year, Derek Harmon, a defensive tackle-heavy class. They took advantage of that. They got one of the top guys there. And point being, the Steelers are drafting for need, but they're drafting for the best player available, and that's the key there that I think that Kevin Colbert lost in some of those late years when he started to miss a lot. Because you look at picks like Terrell Edmunds. Terrell Edmunds was looked at by many people as a 3rd round pick, but the Steelers were on the cusp. After the end of 2017, there was the chance that, man, if they could just figure out the safety position, if they could just figure out the guys in the secondary, they could be in such a good place where their defense is more complete. The same thing with Artie Burns in 2016. The Steelers just desperately needed a corner, and if they could just figure out the cornerback position, everything else will be fine. And they ended up with those picks. Sean Davis also a safety in that regard. I think that sometimes when you get too reliant on trying to pick just for your need, you miss out on really good players in those draft classes that could have helped you kind of solidify your roster, even if they're not at positions where you're ultimately needy. And look at what the Eagles are doing right now. They don't care what if they're drafting another offensive lineman or defensive lineman early. They're getting really good players, and if they overload in good talent, guess what? They'll offload them somehow by trade or some other method. So it's just about getting those best players, and I think that's a big part of it. Now, it's also noteworthy that the Steelers addressed in this draft, again, talking with Ray Fittipaldi about this, one thing the Steelers did with this draft was they addressed the positions that they thought were stronger in the draft class. But before the draft, they made some key moves, of course, signing Darius Slay and trading for DK Metcalf because they didn't like what they saw at either of those positions in the draft. And again, I talked about this with Ray Fittipaldi, but Mike Tomlin said during the press conference Saturday at the end of the NFL draft, he said, quote, this is Mike Tomlin, when free agency hit, we had enough time to analyze the draft pool, and we recognized that maybe those were probably good locations to invest in terms of veteran NFL guys. So that's what we did, talking about Slay and Metcalf. So right there's Mike Tomlin telling you, hey, we didn't believe in the corners and receivers too much. We went to get these veterans because we wanted to solidify ourselves here, but we wanted to make sure we could also capitalize on the parts of the draft that we were more excited about, and which we could tell D-tackle, running back, two primary areas. And I think by my measure, they scored big with both positions there, getting guys later. Let me put it this way. Both their top two picks in Derek Harmon and Caleb Johnson, I had ranked far ahead of where the Steelers picked them. And that's just me. That's just my evaluations. But I think it just shows they got great value there. And again, if Jack Sawyer and Yahya Black can be part of that equation as well, then you can, again, get back to being that more complete roster where you have those depth positions coming to address things from so many different parts. And it gets the Steelers back to being a more balanced roster like they had been in their better years. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to start taking your calls for the Locked On Steelers call-in line, answering your questions. Be sure to stick with us. I'm Chris Carter on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I remind you, this show is brought to you by Game Time. There's nothing better than the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena, and with Game Time, you can be part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Game Time makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. Here's why everyone should use Game Time. The all-in pricing means no surprise fees at checkout. What you see is what you pay. The seat view feature is a game changer. Before I even hit buy, I can see exactly what my seat will look like from the venue. And the best part, you're covered with Game Time's lowest price guaranteed. If you find a better deal somewhere else, they'll refund you 110% of the difference of those prices. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue our show here. As always, we like to do our call-in segments when we get into the show, where you guys can call at any point in time, 412-223-6644. Leave your name, where you're from, get your question under a minute, and we'll try to get your question answer on the show. We got two questions we're going to address in this show, but we do have a lot of questions that have been piling up. We're going to try to get to them over the next several shows or so. Also, if you ever do have questions, even if it's something, if we don't get to it right away, we will eventually get to it, especially if it's something that's not time heavy, like something that's not dependent on, like a lot of the draft questions. We didn't have time to get to all of them because there were just so many, and once the draft's over, the draft questions are kind of irrelevant. But if you have questions that can kind of just apply to the season, feel free to call them in. You might not hear them right away, but trust me, you'll get to them because we want to include a lot of those calls throughout our summer episodes throughout this year, even after like mini camp and such. So definitely call into the show again, 412-223-6644. Let's get to our first question of today's show. This one comes from Dr. Bob out in Erie, Pennsylvania. Dr. Bob, take it away.
Hey, Chris, this is Dr. Bob from Erie, Pennsylvania. I just wanted to say Omar Khan nailed another draft. I think he's phenomenal, and if we would have had him starting back in 2018, the Steelers probably would have had 3 Super Bowls by now, period. My question to you, though, or concern is, during the draft, did you see that the Rams and the Cleveland Browns now own 2 first-round draft picks for next year's draft, which is where Pittsburgh's trying to get their potential franchise quarterback? How concerning is that to you? Because it's concerning to me. Thanks for your feedback. Love the show. Have a great day. Have a blessed day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dr. Bob. As always, you can call 412-223-6644. Leave your name, where you're from. Keep your question under a minute. We'll try to get your question on the show. Dr. Bob brings up a good point. Now, before we get to the whole part of the question about the 2026 quarterbacks, because that is the crux of what's going on there, I want to address the whole, Omar Khan having a great draft. I think it was a good draft, but I do this thing like on Channel 11 Sunday night after the draft. I was asked to give a grade. I'm like, I don't give grades right after draft classes. You know why? Because I don't know how good they are just yet. Now, as far as what I thought they would be, as far as value, like, sure, that's great, but I need to see at least 3, maybe 4 years of a draft class before I say, okay, let's actually grade this and see how good of the picks they were. When we start grading things right after the draft, we don't know how these players are going to pan out. You get all sorts of answers, and it's just there's not a lot of real. It's just kind of just slapping numbers and names on things that don't always, when you don't really know what happens there. So I don't feel comfortable grading classes until there. For example, like the 2022 draft class is a mixed bag right now with Pickett not working out. You got Pickens, Leal, Austin, all that. So like there's a lot going there. We still like even the 2022 draft class. We're waiting to see how Pickens and these guys pan out before we even give that. And again, that's a draft class that's been around for 3 years. So I'm not going to assign just a great grade on the draft yet. I think they met their values, and they met them with guys that I valued, and we'll see where it goes from there. But let's get to the crux of Dr. Bob's question here. The question about the 2026 quarterback draft class and who might get in the way of the Steelers picking their choice at quarterback in that situation. Yes, the Browns and the Rams, through trades that they made on the first day of the draft, they now have 2 first-rounders each, and either could both end up with some or both of their picks falling ahead of the Steelers' natural pick based off of how they do and the teams they traded with do. And despite the pick of Shooter Sanders, I totally see, the Browns in full play for quarterback next season. But make no mistake, I also see the Steelers in play for a top player at quarterback next season. Now, I know you're probably thinking, well, wait a minute, Chris, they can't all be in play. And I remind people, yes, they can. And a big part of this is because of the expectations for what that quarterback class could be. Let's look at the teams first before we look at the players. Let's look at the teams that we could expect to be quarterback-needy teams next season. You got the Browns. I mean, sure, they drafted Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. They have Kenny Pickett. But let's not pretend they're probably going to be looking for a quarterback next year as well. But you got the Browns, you got the Saints, who didn't draft a guy early. They got Tyler Shuck. I don't know if they bank on that, but hey, that's another team. The Rams, I think they could get guys. Even though they signed Justin Fields, I put the Jets in that conversation. Anthony Richardson probably gets one more year before the Colts want to remove. And then there's I know the Raiders have made some moves to get their quarterback with Geno Smith, but I also think that they could put themselves in the position. Also, the Seahawks come to mind. All these teams there, I would consider potentially being in that first round range. But even without them, even with those 6 teams, I still think the Steelers have a chance to be competitive in that spot. Now, yes, are those teams with 2 first round picks more likely to trade up and have the ammunition to kind of get those high picks? Sure. But again, why this class of 2026 looks like it could be better and more beneficial for the Steelers to take part in is because there's not just one first round quarterback like we all thought in Cam Ward. There could be 4 to 6 guys like Cam Ward in this draft class, and that's where I think the true value can be. And the Steelers wouldn't have to compete to get the top of the top pick here to get a quarterback, just one that's high enough. We talked about this with Alan Saunders. The Steelers could trade up into the bottom of the top 10 and still get one of their guys. I think it's important to use history often to kind of look at how these things could play out. Let's look at some quarterback needy drafts with quarterback, where there were several teams that needed quarterbacks that were being aggressive, and there were quarterbacks that they could address and that they were excited to get. So let's look at these draft picks, and these are, I'm going to name players who were drafted to teams that made them their franchise quarterbacks, and they were all picked outside of the top 5 of their respective classes. 2020, the Chargers selected Justin Herbert 6th overall. He was the 3rd quarterback picked that year. 2020, same year, it was a big year for quarterback draft classes. 2020, the Packers, they took Jordan Love 26th overall, the 4th quarterback picked that year. Jalen Hurts, also 2020, 53rd overall, the 5th quarterback taken that year. That guy just won a Super Bowl for his team, as being a second round pick. You don't have to spend the draft capital to get a top 3 pick just to get your guy if you think that your guy can be getting there. And again, it goes past 2020. Let's look at 2018, another big year for quarterbacks. In 2018, the Bills, they picked Josh Allen. Yes, MVP Josh Allen, 7th overall. He was also the 3rd quarterback picked that year. So, like, again, you can get good value without having to sell the entire farm to move up into a top 3, top 5 pick there. And that same draft class, 2018, Lamar Jackson, 32nd overall. He was the 4th quarterback pick that year. By the way, another MVP there. The year before that, Patrick Mahomes was picked 10th overall. He was the 2nd quarterback pick that year. So all those players I just named, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 franchise quarterbacks on teams right now that are making teams either that are winning Super Bowls or getting them in position so that they could be Super Bowl contenders. All of them picked outside the top 5 of their draft classes, which is why I think it's not outside the realm of a possibility for the Steelers to trade up and go get their guy with reasonable picks there. Even with, a couple of the teams having picks to move up and wanting to be in that position, I think the Steelers are in a fine place there. Of course, Steelers fans should also remember another big name that wasn't picked in the top 5, who was the 3rd pick of his quarterback draft class. That was Ben Roethlisberger back in 2004 when he was picked 11th overall and the 3rd quarterback pick behind Phillip Rivers and Eli Manning. Look, I get the skepticism. Like, Dr. Bob, I understand everyone's kind of being like, hey, what if it doesn't work out? Like we're all talking about, yay, the 2026 quarterback draft class. What if it doesn't work out? What are the chances that the Steelers don't get a shot at a favorite guy that they like throughout the draft class? And again, we don't know what this draft class is even going to look like a year out from now. We don't really know for sure. But the bottom line is that we had a good look at this 2025 draft class, and it didn't look good. And if I'm a person financially and I need to make a big investment and I can't afford to miss on my next big investment, I'd rather wait for the next round of investments than to try to throw my money at something that I'm confident won't work out, which is what I think the Steelers were looking at when they were looking at this quarterback draft class. That's why Omar Khan and Mike Tomlin did this year by not picking a quarterback, and that's why they're looking into next year. And listen, I'm fully aware things could happen that could make next year's draft class turn out to not be as great as one would have hoped. Players could back out of the draft class. Guys who were thought to be really good could turn out to not be really good. A year ago, people thought Carson Beck would be a 1st round pick. That didn't work out. He's still in college football, and we'll see if that's brought back into the equation. I'm not a big Carson Beck guy, but again, like, it's unpredictable as far as the classes. But again, if it happens that the 2026 quarterback draft class isn't as impressive as we would hope, I think it's better that the Steelers are willing to wait and see if they'll have to cross that bridge when they get there. Because to me, crossing a potential of a bridge being there where they're going to have to wait for a quarterback is better than just jumping off the bridge with a parachute that you're not even confident will work by picking a bad quarterback in a draft class that isn't good. And that's why I think the Steelers made the right move here. Again, I'm not guaranteeing that 2026 is going to work out and just the next Ben Roethlisberger is going to fall in their lap. But I think, again, you have a better chance at getting there by picking at a position where you can expect more out of in a class where there's more competition at the quarterback position. So, again, I think that there's a lot there. Great question, Dr. Bob. But with the other part of here is there's 4 to 6 quarterbacks we're talking about here. So we're not talking about one quarterback like Cam Ward and then everyone else is lower this. We're talking about not just Arch Manning, maybe he doesn't come out, but Nico Iamaleava, LaNorris Sellers, Garrett Nussmeier, Drew Aller, Cade Klubnik, and Sam Leavitt. There's a bunch of guys that could qualify for that. And then there's always quarterbacks that sneak up on you. That's like, hey, I didn't know that guy was going to be in the mix this year. That's what I think could really happen in favor of the Steelers. If they're just patient, they need to just keep pushing through. So Thank you for your question, Dr. Bob. We got to take a quick break. When we come back, we take another question about Darius Slay in that cornerback position that the Steelers felt like they needed to address before the draft. We'll do that next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you this show is also brought to you by Amazon Fire TV. Did you know that your Fire TV is also an Xbox? You can turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign in to Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and Avowed. As easily as you stream your favorite shows, it's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. With 4K streaming, you can watch more than 1.5 million movies and TV episodes from your favorite subscribed services like Netflix, Prime Video, Disney+, Max, and so much more. I stream so many different shows all the time that it's great to have them all in one place, right with where I need the game to get all my gaming services because of Amazon Fire TV, which is wonderfully convenient. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube 3rd Gen. Amazon Fire TV. We're back on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Let's get back to the phone lines. Again, you can call in with your question at 412-223-6644. Leave your name, where you're from. Keep your question under a minute. This question comes from North Carolina. Take it away, David.
Hey, Chris. This is David Berry from Wake Forest, North Carolina. Hey, man. When I hear people talk about the Darius Slay pickup, I don't really hear anybody mention Patrick Peterson. And when I think about it, I get flashbacks, bad flashbacks. I think Patrick Peterson should have been benched. We kept him in way too long. Huge liability. Couldn't keep up with the fast guys on offense, and he just outdated from the league. Are we worried? It doesn't sound like anybody's worried about this with Slay, and I'm not sure why. It seems like a very similar situation. I'd love to hear your input. Appreciate it. Go Steelers.
Thank you, David, for your question. As always, call in like David did and Dr. Bob did at 412-223-6644. Leave your name, where you're from. Keep your question under a minute. That's a good question about Darius Slay. I do think people have brought it up, though, because people, at least I brought it up, but these other people have brought it up. I've joked about it, at least with other writers. Look, yeah, Slay, he's 34. And at his age, it's reasonable to compare him to Peterson because both were at the end of their legendary careers. But I do think there are a few differences here. So let's talk about those differences are that are noteworthy. For one, when Peterson was brought into the Steelers in 2023, he was expected to do something different than what Slay's going to be asked to do in 2025. For example, Patrick Peterson, when he was brought to the Steelers, he was CB1 of the defense. They had Levi Wallace. They had Joey Porter Jr. And Joey Porter Jr. was a rookie who needed to grow into being a capable starter. And that was a big part of Patrick Peterson's role. It was just he was there to be that veteran mentor to help him along. Eventually, when he was getting beat because he just wasn't fast enough to keep up with really good wide receivers because he was the team's top cornerback option, he dropped back to being a safety for a little bit because he couldn't keep up with those receivers, and that became a problem. So the question is reasonable. Could Darius Slay have the same issue? Possibly so, because Father Time's undefeated. Let's face it. Like, everyone ages out, and cornerback especially ages out. But I think part of this is that Darius Slay, and part of what I think could make this work out, Darius Slay isn't being asked to be CB1. He's asked to be CB2, which is a different role where he's going to be able to take on matchups that can find more favorability towards him. Joey Porter Jr., he's going to be CB1. He's going to be taking on the top wide receivers. But as cornerback 2, Slay can get more favorable matchups. The Steelers scheme up in situations where he can be expected to win. He won't be going up against Justin Jefferson. Now, again, granted, like, you go up against Justin Jefferson means you're going up against Jordan Addison. That's still a top-tier talent. Same thing for, like, Jamar Chase and the Bengals with T. Higgins and the Bengals. But not every team has that second super dynamic wide receiver, and that's where I think Darius Slay could probably still win plenty of matchups there. Even in his last year with the Eagles, Darius Slay was clearly locked in and breaking up passes. He had 17 forced incompletions, according to Pro Football Focus. That is tied for the most in the NFL last year with Denzel Ward. Very good corner for the Browns. And much of that came from Darius Slay's savviness as a cornerback and how he studied opposing receivers. Now, I fully expect for Slay to actually get beat at times. I'm not saying he's going to be infallible. He's just going to shut everyone down. Don't mistake that for what I'm saying here. What I am saying is, though, I do think that he could come in, be a solid presence there, and help in the secondary without being a gaping hole that just leaves up coverage all the time. Remember, one of the biggest things the Steelers harked on, towards the end of the season was guys weren't in their positions often enough. Darius Slay, that's a guy who's all about being in position and studying and being part of making sure he's detailed in his work. That's where I think that you can get a lot more out of, one, a cornerback two, but also two, Darius Slay being that cornerback two, because he can bring that veteran presence, set a tone, challenge young guys. All those things could work in your favor moving forward. So I think that's the thing here. The best hope is if you're looking for Darius Slay to be a difference maker this year, it's as CB2, as a cornerback two, taking on the number 2 wide receivers on teams more often than not. And it's about being more of a cog in the machine of the Steelers defense than being the pillar piece moving forward, like some other players will end up being. So thank you for your questions, Dr. Bod and David. Appreciate your questions here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. As always, you can call 412-223-6644. Leave your name, where you're from, give your question under a minute. And thank you all for tuning into the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, all the social medias, same handles every time, at Carter Critiques. You can read my work in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com, and you can find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every day, Monday through Friday, breaking down your Pittsburgh Steelers. Back here tomorrow with another episode. We got Jenna Harner coming on. It's going to be a fun one. We'll see you then on the Locked On Steelers podcast.